The judge is really trying to get at the issue here of whether his order was violated. So he asked the attorney for the Justice Department in the room today, who was in the room over the weekend when the judge issued that order from the bench saying to stop the planes. He asked that lawyer, what was your understanding of what I had said at that point? And the attorney said that he understood that the judge's order was binding and that it was effective immediately. So when he said it from the bench, because the Trump administration officials have suggested that maybe it wasn't official until it was a written order. So the judge wanted to get on record right then and there that the attorney in the room who relayed the conversation believed that the order was in effect the moment the judge said it from the bench. Now, this lawyer had said that he couldn't share the details of what he discussed with his clients, the executive branch, because that was covered by attorney-client privilege. But the judge really trying to make sure that he has on record that the lawyer in the room was not mistaken and that he knew that the order was to stop the planes when the judge said it from the bench. Now, the bulk of this hearing was also focused on what exactly the judge's role here could be, because, there's these issues of people being deported and the judge saying that this actually raises some serious policy implications. He said that it's incredibly troublesome, problematic, and concerning the way that this is being applied under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, saying it is unprecedented and expanded use of this, and that if this is allowed to proceed, it could mean that the president could deport anyone from the country, even, say, a Chinese fisherman who is in the U.S. waters. So, trying to get at what the scope of what could entail here if individuals who are picked up are not able to challenge that. And that's a lot of what this focus was on. What would be the proper way for someone to say that they are not a member of this Venezuelan gang that was the basis for their removal? The judge, though, really began the hearing focusing on his order and whether that was violated, and also coming right back to that at the end of the hearing, because he noted that the government, he said, was not being cooperative, but he said, I will get to the bottom of whether my order was violated, who ordered the violation of the order, and what those consequences will be. So no decision here today on whether the judge is going to change the scope of this temporary order blocking the deportation, but he's certainly saying that he is not giving up his quest to find out whether his order was violated and who is behind that. Casey?
All right, Kara Scannell for us. Kara, thanks very much for that reporting. Jamie Gangel and Elliot, I want your perspective as well, because you've worked inside the Justice Department. These are some pretty tough words from this judge, and I know you've got sources you've been talking to about how this is all landing.
So first of all, I'm not surprised that he said this today, and not the lawyer, but as the daughter of a judge. Let me tell you, those words translate into something that you can't even say on cable television. He is furious, and talking to legal experts, I think we have to keep in mind that the judge was not just speaking about this case today. This is a message to the Trump administration, to the Trump DOJ, that this is not acceptable.
Yeah. Elliot?
I think if we just step back, two things can be true at the same time. One is that there are people that we don't want in the United States, either as a matter of morals or as a matter of law. And two, that the methods for getting those people out of the country might be improper, right? The only party who can answer that is the judge. And all the judge was doing and has been doing throughout this matter is trying to get to the bottom of, number one, who are the people that were on that plane? And number two, what are the means by which you sought to get them out of the country? Those are basic questions a judge ought to be asking. And the language the Justice Department used, accusing the judge of beating a dead horse and so on, which sounds like we would joke with each other and use that language in common parlance. You don't use that language when speaking to a judge. Now, you could use it when criticizing.
Or you shouldn't.
Well, you shouldn't. One ought not. Now, when criticizing another party or the strength of their argument, certainly, you might see that kind of thing. But it was and has been a tone that is pretty remarkable in court, and the judge spoke unambiguously about it today.
He's trying to get facts that will allow him to make that determination. And the government is stonewalling, which is a little bit difficult to understand since so much of this is clearly not a matter of state secrets. For instance, the fact that Trump invoked the Alien Act, or the fact that these planes took off and landed, which the government itself paraded around on social media. So although normally when state secrets are involved, courts don't inquire too deeply beyond the fact of the invocation, here it's entirely appropriate. And what this attestation from the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, does is it's minimal compliance with the court's order. Todd Blanche has simply said, I'm aware and I've been involved in these conversations at the cabinet level. Look, I think it's appropriate for the cabinet to take its time to determine whether or not to invoke state secrets, which is a common law doctrine that prevents courts from inquiring into military secrets that could damage our national security. On the other hand, the government is flirting with violating the judge's order, and he has plenty of possibilities for contempt proceedings against the government if he finally loses his patience with them.
So tell us more about that, because we've seen Judge Boasberg repeatedly ask for more information and not get it. Realistically, what more can he do or other judges do in a case like this?
Right. So I guess the most strident possibility here, Anna, would be to go after the government for some form of criminal contempt. And although we might normally say, well, that can't happen since the Justice Department is the prosecution, there's actually a provision in the federal rules of criminal procedure that lets the judge appoint a private prosecutor if the government isn't willing, which they almost certainly would not be willing in this situation. There's some precedent for that to happen. I've been involved in a matter in my district many years ago during the Bush administration where a judge actually did that and permitted a prosecution for contempt to move forward, in that case against a private party, not the government. But there's good indication from courts in the District of Columbia that you can take sanctions against the government, including jailing government officials or requiring them to pay damages personally if a contempt prosecution is successful.
Julia, there's still this big question about whether the people who were deported were even who the government says they were. They've been called gang members and terrorists.
We haven't heard back from him since that filing from Blanche. And of course, yes, Blanche was just underscoring what the field office director, the acting field office director for ICE, was saying, is that they're having cabinet level meetings to decide whether they're going to guard these answers as state secrets. We should point out that they did provide some answers, but they just weren't satisfactory, and they didn't answer all of the questions that Boasberg posed. He's trying to understand if they violated his order, the verbal order he gave to turn the planes around. The only answer they've given so far is that the third plane, the one that took off at 7:25 p.m. or after, that was not in violation because those immigrants weren't deported under the Alien Enemies Act. But they have not yet explained if there were planes in the air that should have been turned around. Although we should say in court, they said that they interpreted his written order to supersede his verbal order. And the written order, which was much more succinct, did not include commands to turn those planes around in the air, Alex.
Okay, and one argument the administration is making, Julia, to not turn them around is once they reached international airspace, that they wouldn't necessarily have been able to comply with a federal judge's orders. Is that right?
That's right. That's one of the arguments made. But of course, you could say, look, it was still well within the power of the United States to comply with the order by turning the planes around, really up until the point that those people are handed over to El Salvadoran authorities on the tarmac. Of course, we've heard them say they're saying that the order in the written docket is the one that they are going to follow rather than the verbal one. But as far as when these people left the custody or the power of the United States government, it wouldn't have been until they were handed over to those people on the tarmac. They could have even taken off again, theoretically.
Yeah. So, Harry, were it to go this far, what would it mean to hold an administration in contempt? I mean, could we actually see someone hauled off to jail, even a cabinet member?
Well, yes, although that would be after things escalate. It's really important, Alex, to underscore there are two different things going on here. There is the question whether it was lawful in the first instance. You just heard the president say we wouldn't want to make mistakes by deporting people who aren't even in this group. I think that's right. And the way you determine that is always with a court. You also, the statute says it has to be an invasion, basically, of our shores by a foreign country. Doesn't seem a very good fit at all. That's the sort of thing that will be taken up today in Boasberg's court. But he's letting them go on the question. I said things very firmly in an emergency order Saturday. Did you violate them or not? And the administration has said every different thing every day, including now, it's picayune, let it go, Judge. Boasberg wants to know, And he's doing us all really sort of a favor. He is fleshing them out to understand, are you violating orders here and now? Are you just playing kind of cute? The judiciary needs to know that, and indeed they do. So all this stuff, you're exactly right, and Julia's exactly right. Nothing new from Blanche today. He's given them 3 or 4 chances. And this is just information about, when did the planes take off, things they've been public about. Mm-hmm. And now the latest is, well, maybe it's a state secret. Okay. Is that what you're saying? Maybe we didn't have authority in international air. That's bogus, by the way. They did. But is that what you're saying? I want to know, because I want to know if you violated my order, and I am not letting this go.
All right, so that's what the judge wants to go after, Jeff. But if we focus on the hearing later today on the merits of the case, what defense has the White House laid out in last weekend's presidential proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act in the first place?
Well, to start, I think they're still figuring out what they want to say about that, because the judge has been drilling them on them, and whether or not that they can use the Alien Enemies Act, because it's not something that's normally used when it's not wartime. So the administration has indicated that there are high-level discussions about that, cabinet-level discussions about that, and I think some of that is still TBD. I also want to kind of step back and talk about the politics of all of this, including, to your question, the arguments that they've laid out. They're speaking not only to the audience of the judge, which of course is really important because that's the court that they're appearing before, but also to the audience of the American public and Trump supporters who are cheering on any action that this president is taking to fulfill a campaign promise to remove people out of the country that he says have committed these crimes. And he was just referring to that in the Oval Office as well. I also thought quite interestingly that he acknowledges that they don't want to make mistakes. That indicates that maybe they have.
I mean, what you're seeing here is Trump taking a loss, and that Supreme Court move by Justice Roberts is playing a big role. Not only has Trump lost Supreme Court cases before, he's going to continue to lose them. Not enough of them, but more than a few. He might even lose more than half of his Supreme Court cases going forward. But Justice Roberts, we talked about this a couple days ago, came out and said, you're not allowed to threaten judges, Donald. You and your movement are not allowed to threaten people. The response to you losing a case in the structure that ends in the Supreme Court is not to threaten people, but to keep appealing. And if you lose at the Supreme Court, I mean, that's kind of that is what it is. I mean, you can even get around that by proposing a constitutional amendment. You can go above the Supreme Court. You can amend the Constitution. This idea that the only thing you can do is threaten people is insane. And I don't think it's a coincidence, because whether the judges beneath him are Democrats or Republicans or what have you, when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court speaks, judges down the line listen. And when he came out and said, and again, it's not enough, and I'm not going to call a George W. Bush appointed judge a hero, right? But when he came out and he said that Donald was acting inappropriately, that probably gave a lot of judges more courage to stand up to Trump and to stand up to his cronies and say, you can't do this. You're acting like a nut job. And what some experts are suggesting is judges are saying, we can't lock you up, Donald, but we can lock up a lot of your cronies. Beware.